It's me, Brian. So, this just happened. Got a text from a coworker, and it broke my brain. I read it, and I read it, and I read it, and it did not make sense. Well, that's not true. Everything made sense until the very end, where he put dot 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 NBD. What does NBD stand for? I had to Google it. I had to look it up. Now, I will admit, my brain doesn't get acronyms. It's a good thing I never went into the military. I keep my distance from the government as much as possible. But for whatever reason, my brain just does not process acronyms. There's common ones I don't have a problem with. FYI, LOL, CPU, GPU. Some of that stuff, I get ABS, ADD. I get that, right? But outside of those very, very rare, common, super common ones, I have to think about. Years back, I was working for another company, was in sales training, and we were talking about ROI. And everybody was ROI, 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 ROI. And I finally went, what's ROI? And what if the person that I'm talking to in my job as a salesperson doesn't know what ROI is? And everybody looked at me like I was an alien. And some snickered, some kind of laughed. And then someone said, well, if you're talking to someone that doesn't know what ROI is, then you're talking to the wrong person. And I said, well, I guess I'm the wrong person because I don't know what ROI is. And that's where the instructor finally breaks in and says, return on investment. I go, okay, that I understand. I know exactly what return on investment means. It's very clear. ROI, I didn't get it. I wouldn't have went there in a million years. I actually have a list of common acronyms in my industry so that I can reference it and understand what people are talking about. So I have a big problem with acronyms because I personally don't get them. I've read books. I read a book from a former defense secretary that when he was defense secretary, one of the very first rules he put into place as secretary of defense was no acronyms. Because the government and the military specifically is loaded full of them. And his contention was, and I agree with this, but maybe that's just because I don't get acronyms, but his contention was people use those acronyms and many times they don't know what they actually mean or they don't know their full history behind the acronym. POTUS, President of the United States. But POTUS can also mean, I believe it's either the Secretary of Defense or the head of the generals. I forget what, the top general, the top dude. I think they could be called POTUS also. And so that's confusing. You've got CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, spies, and Culinary Institute of America, chefs, right? So this whole thing with acronyms is a problem. I also think in my industry, in many industries, it's a gatekeeper device, right? It's if you don't know our terms, then you're not one of us and we're going to keep you out. And so I try to, in my day-to-day life, especially when talking with people outside of my industry or just people in general, I try not to use acronyms. Again, because I don't get them, so I try not to get them, and I try and train my friends and the people that I'm around not to use them around me, because the minute there's an acronym that's dropped. Luckily, most of my friends don't use them in day-to-day speech. It's in text messages, because then I can sit there and go and try and figure it out, or Google it. There, like I said, there are some that I get. There are some that I don't. NBD, I now know is no big deal. All right. But BRB. Okay, be right back. I looked these up. IMO, in my opinion, or I am HO, in my humble opinion. So I got to think about these things. BBL, learned a new one. GBF. And this one's tricky because it can mean two different things. It could be girl best friend or guy best friend. All right, GBH. OFC. And anything with an F in it, you immediately go to, well, you know which word, right? So it's that I get stuck in that. I'm like, well, how does that make sense? So my brain doesn't work. I also like to point out sometimes when people use acronyms, such as a common one, ASAP. We'll be in a group and it's like, hey, we need to get this done ASAP. And I'll say, great, I can get that done in 6 months. And they're like, no, we meant as soon as possible. It's like, right, as soon as possible. It's possible I could get that done in 6 months. Is that as soon as possible? I mean, they use that ASAP to mean right now or very quickly, but it actually means as soon as possible, and that may be weeks, days, weeks, months, depends on the project, right? As soon as possible doesn't mean I'm going to do it right now. But maybe I'm just being a little picky because I don't get acronyms. I don't know what to say. I could use some help in that area, and texting is a nightmare for me. I also found out that I'm not supposed to use punctuation in texting, but that's a video for another time. So, it's just a thought. I will not be using acronyms in any of my videos. Have a good night.